we're pleased to welcome Kyle Gammenthaler to the show.
That's good. First try.
Okay.
That's good.
All right.
I've heard way worse. Yeah, no, that's perfect.
What is your favorite superpower?
Favorite superpower? Yeah, so I'm going to give a little bit of nuance to this one.
Please.
So I'm going to choose time travel.
Okay.
But here's the caveat. I only want to go back.
Oh.
So I'm not somebody that reads the end of a story. I don't really like spoilers. Try to, maintain the integrity of the future.
Right.
But going back, there's just a lot of cool moments that I think would be great to experience. I'd also have to be careful about, of course, changing things, which I'd be careful of,
or making a lot of money on sports gambling. There's some things that are really positive about that. But I think going back and experiencing moments in history would just be a, really cool experience and being able to do that. Give us 1 minute on what you do.
Sure. So I teach nonprofit and philanthropy courses here at Mays Business School. Get to engage with a group of students that, are trying to find their way in the nonprofit impact-driven space, and primarily at Mays Business School. So I get to teach a couple courses every semester, work with students on a daily basis to really just ask questions about their future as they're asking questions about their future.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of student involvement, a lot of student engagement, and really around this topic of what does impact look like? What, where am I going in this world? A lot of questions we all ask, but a lot of our students are a little bit braver to ask it now. So
sure.
Yeah.
2 minutes on how you got there.
Sure. So I started in the nonprofit sector, here locally at United Way of the Brazos Valley. I was a fundraiser and volunteer manager, manage a volunteer center for a 7-county region for a little bit, while raising, half of a campaign's worth of money for a local nonprofit. And so that was just a really sweet experience to be able to advocate for people that, for a lack of a better way, don't advocate or can't advocate for themselves in ways that are meaningful. And so we were able to do that. I worked with a lot of local businesses doing workplace campaigns. And so a lot of, talking about issues and then kind of had an opportunity through a mutual friend that worked here, Eric Newman. I'll give a shout out to Eric Newman, who worked here and said, hey, there's an opportunity to work with students. I think you'd like it. And so came on board over at Mays to advise students and work with the nonprofit certificate, and really found that I enjoyed working with students on a base level, but then I felt like I was talking to myself a lot, especially in the early years. So it was an opportunity to kind of move into the A&M space, and I missed the nonprofit space, which is interesting now because I'm actually on the board of United Way, the one that I worked with, years ago. So it's fun for things to come full circle like that. But, I've just walked through open doors and taken chances, here in town. And, it's been a fun ride so far.
Why? What led you toward an emphasis on philanthropy and nonprofit work? You talked a second ago about advocating for those who can't advocate for themselves. What drove you in that respect? Yeah.
So in college, I was involved in student organizations. The main one here at A&M was the Wells Project, advocating for, clean water overseas and that kind of stuff. And I've just kind of, had always had that affinity towards, I felt like I've been given opportunity that others don't have.
Sure.
and being able to utilize that in a way that is meaningful, has always been, top of mind. And so it's almost more of a responsibility than anything. I feel like if I'm not doing that, then I'm not doing.
So let me see if we can dig even a little deeper. Do you think that came from your parents? Was it teachers? Was you nodded?
Yeah, all the above.
Yeah.
My wife, so I grew up in a family that was very generous, and so that certainly rubbed off.
Right.
And then I'm sure we'll talk about my family a lot later, but my wife is somebody that's a model citizen for caring about the needs of others, and so I guess while we were dating in college, there was a certain piece of keeping up with, her ability to just see the needs around her and step into people's lives. And, care for them in a way that I just didn't even see as an option. And so, so I think there's been a lot of people, a lot of models along the way that I've looked at and said, I want to be like that or be more towards that, or I'm not even close to that, but I can work towards that a little bit. But it's not through any one specific moment. It's just been this gradual progression of opportunities to engage the people around me. And, you just say yes a lot of the times and it happens.
Out of curiosity, are you religious?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Was that the paradigm through which you learned generosity at a young age?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a Christian background, and, a big piece of that is, what I believe is to be caring for those that aren't cared for traditionally, those that are outcast. And I haven't been one normally that's been the outcast, right? Sure. Although it would be well-deserved in many ways in our society and culture. I have had privilege. And so, the Christian background, certainly that upbringing is just so critical to the work that I do. But yet at the same time, being able to translate that to a broader audience, there's some pieces of that are not exclusive to that particular religion, certainly. That is a lot of the foundation that I'm drawing from as I move through my experience.
One experiential learning course in particular that you teach consists of students evaluating local nonprofits to determine how to distribute $50,000 to $100,000. Tell us more about how the course works.
Yeah, so that's a big one. So it's a course I teach called Strategic Philanthropy. Mm-hmm. So in 2015, summer 15, I had what I thought was a brilliant idea. And let me make sure that is sarcasm. There was a local news article that was written and I said that, and they wrote it like I was just saying, I had a brilliant idea.
Right.
Period. So I had what I thought was a brilliant idea, and that was, I think it'd be really cool if students could give away money in a classroom setting. I felt like being able to practice generosity was something that would be a really fruitful experience. And then my next thought was, I don't have the money personally, so I can't really do that. And I hope somebody else has thought of this that also has a lot of money for me to work with and give away their money, because I don't have that as much as I would love to. And so I started looking around, and, surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, there are a lot of organizations around the country that are dedicated towards funding philanthropic education. And probably a lot of reasons for that. I imagine those that have a lot want to be sure that those that come after them learn how to manage that well.
Sure.
In a meaningful way.
Yeah.
So started looking around at some numbers of organizations that how much money they were giving away or giving out, and ran across an organization called the Philanthropy Lab. So the Philanthropy Lab has been such a crucial partner to the work that we do here. And they fund philanthropic education courses at Harvard, Stanford, UT, Baylor, TCU, Abilene Christian, Michigan, all these peer and aspirant schools. And we weren't on that list. And I wanted to be on that list because they were, and we weren't. So reached out to them, and, as it goes, there was some Aggie connection there in terms of somebody that had been asking why it wasn't at A&M yet. And we were able to bring that course here in spring 16. Mm-hmm. And it's just it works on a lot of levels. Students are able to learn about generosity, both personally, but then practice it in a more professional environment as they essentially run a private foundation here each semester.
Do you have a specific example?
Yeah. The one that stands out is Health for All. They are a health clinic here locally that provides free medical care to the underinsured and uninsured. And so that people who have routine illnesses don't wait until they're so serious that they can't manage them themselves at all. Mm-hmm. with really simple healthcare. Liz Dickey is the executive director, and she's just incredibly passionate. She's one of the ones who's had a few of our students as board members, and think of her joy when giving away the checks, because she's always just blown away by, even after they've received checks multiple times, understandably so, because they're an awesome organization. But seeing her personal excitement, and a few times she has just spontaneously said thank you to the students and to just whoever is listening in that check celebration moment. And it's unscripted. Those unscripted moments are when it just kind of spills out, because that's a validation of the work they're doing, right? It's a validation that, hey, others believe in what we do. And at this point in time, it's tied to a specific value of, a dollar value. But the fact that everybody's here, seeing her excitement and her joy is a lot of fun. And we've also given to organizations that I care about as well. So although I don't get a vote, I kind of give a little mini fist pump whenever they give to organizations that I'm like, yeah, I would have done that if I was you, and so it's fun interacting with them and saying, and they thank me. I say, oh no, I didn't do it. They did it. They saw it. They're like, oh wow, okay, this is real.
This issue hits close to home for me, because I'm always wondering which nonprofits would economize best on my donations. Sure. We've had Chris Field of Mercy Project on the show.
Good friend.
I think that a lot of people end up donating to organizations where they know someone involved with the organization, because they're like, oh, so-and-so would use my money. Well,
sure.
I think in Chris's case, it's particularly relevant because Chris is also an entrepreneur, and he thinks like an economist. So shouts to Chris. But so let's move into the course itself. Sure. What is your most cherished memory from the course now that you've brought it in? Yeah.
So, I mean, the softball answer is really recent. We reached our $500,000 mark this past spring.
Congratulations.
It was, so just a little bit more on the background of the course. Every dollar we give away comes from another donor. So somebody else has said, I'm delegating my responsibility to give, for lack of a better term, to you students through my class, and then they make the decisions. And so every dollar we've given away has come from somebody else. And so there's a lot of trust there. We can talk about trust as much as we want, but
sure.
The cherished memory is yes, the dollar amount, which I think is really, really great. But we do a check celebration every semester, when we give away the big giant checks to nonprofits. So we're giving away between 50 and 100,000 every semester. Usually 5 to 8 nonprofits are getting it. And so the cherished moments are those moments when you get to meet the nonprofits face to face, most of which I know, some of which I don't. And we get to celebrate the work that they do here locally. And it's just really hard to mimic that in any other environment. Just true joy for, some validation for the work that they're doing. Being able to see that and see the students be like, oh, okay, it's real. This is why we do this. This hasn't been a simulated activity. They're actually going to go out and do real work with this money. So, but yeah, I think most recently is hitting that milestone, which has been really great. Most surprising challenge? It's a huge responsibility. I mean, I don't know. I probably should have expected that. That is, someone's giving me $50,000. We've had a family over 3 years give us over $200,000 of their own funds to give away to students that they don't know. Good bull. Good bull to them, there. Whoever they are. Yeah, the Van Lowe family. It's no secret. They've been an incredible supporter of the class. Grace Van Lowe took the very first class, and then her family just, they bought into the vision of the course. And so most surprising challenge, has been the responsibility on my end, because I don't have a vote. So I set the stage for the students. Students make all the decisions. They say yes, they say no, they say maybe, they decide amounts and what to give. But I actually, at certain points in the semester, step back and I don't have a vote in where the money goes. That's really, I think that's a smart approach. What do the students then get graded on? It's a lot of reflection. So we do a lot of writing. Yeah. Because I think the topic of philanthropy is so broad and diverse and personal that it lends itself really well to reflection in a lot of great ways. So there's a lot of writing, a lot of participation. Class is heavily discussion oriented, and so there's a lot of reading and expectations in the classroom environment for being engaged. It's a class of 18 students, so not huge, but not tiny either. I mean, so your voice can get muddled in a group of 18. But so it's, being purposefully engaged, writing quality, level of commitment to diving deep into your thoughts, and then other assignments that are there along the way. But a lot of it is about the process that they're in, and recognizing both in written form and in engagement, the responsibility that they have to do this well.
So let's talk a little bit about specific external impacts in terms of how the course has had an effect on the community. Sure. You mentioned internal impacts in terms of, the donations that have been received and so forth, but has there been a particularly relevant moment in terms of what you've been able to do for outside?
Sure. So the fact that we get to operate heavily locally, I mean, 95% of our funds have stayed right here in the Brazos Valley, which was on purpose in many ways, allows us to drive by buildings that we've helped fund and pull up next to a trailer that helps rebuild and repair houses for elderly and the disabled and veterans. Pull up next to the trailer on Wellborn Road, right, and be like, "Oh, that's what we funded right there. Yeah. That's what the students funded," and they get to do that as well. So living here and this being home for me, I get to interact with the nonprofits and actually see the work that's been funded over the years. One marker of, success or impact that we've had has been when some local nonprofits have asked some of the students to serve as voting board members on their board their senior year. Okay. So, which was not expected. But as students have interacted with the nonprofits, traditionally, nationally, the nonprofit student to nonprofit board engagement model is traditionally in the MBA space, the graduate level space, which for a lot of good reasons. But I think one sneaky reason that I'm not a big fan of is that we assume that they're the most qualified to engage issues of value in a community. And I think our local nonprofits, in fact, are many of the experts in working with students here, especially here in College Station. That's what they do. And so they see a junior and they see their passion and they see how much they care. And they say, "We want your voice in our organization, not just to be there, but to be a legal voting binding board member." And so we've had a handful of those, which I think is a testament more to the students and their ability to connect with the issues in powerful ways.
We've talked a lot about empowering the young recently on the show. And I think that's, in How to Win Friends and Influence People, Carnegie talks about giving the other person a great name to live up to. And I think historically in American business, we've always sort of shunted young people to the side a little bit. And I think it's great that people, 17, 18, 19, 20, that we're valuing the contributions that that people that age can make to what we're doing, and the power of a young person to innovate should never be underestimated.
I agree.
Next thing, you're the coordinator for the certificate in nonprofit and social innovation. What is that?
Sure. So it's probably most similar to a minor, but it's exclusive to students at Mays Business School. Just the term we use is a certificate. Right. So it's a space for students to supplement their primary major in a way that allows them to focus on a topic area that they are interested in some way. And so the way I kind of talk about it is it's for students who want to work for, with, or alongside nonprofits or social purpose type of organizations. Mm-hmm. So there's no expectation of them to be certified to then work in a nonprofit, or for them to be certified to then only work for Tom's or Patagonia, right? Right. But they are equipped in many ways to speak that language right away. We don't do a lot of, there's not a lot of undergraduate education around nonprofit. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But But the certificate gives them a space to operate within 13 hours of credits, an internship with a nonprofit or an organization that's moving towards some kind of social purpose. And so they graduate with it. And we've had, we graduate about 12 to 15 students every year. We have about 60 pursuing it at any one time. Classes are full. So there's definitely an interest there. And those are just Mays Business School students. So it's a really fun experience.
Tell me about your tattoo on your wrist. For the listeners, is two circles and then a circle at the end that's filled in.
So it's a personal one, which as they are, it's visible. We have two kids now. The closed circle, we had a miscarriage. So we wanted a way to always remember one that we lost. We'll have to add another circle in November because we have one on the way.
Right. So congratulations.
This arm is going to be very full probably at some point. But my wife and I both have the same one. We were talking about a way to remember something that you feel like kind of fades over time. And this is certainly a permanent way to do that. And so, absolutely. Thanks for asking.
Of course. What are your dreams for the future of Mays in the nonprofit space? How do you see the courses you teach growing or changing in the next few years?
It's a big question. So weirdly, I think we will move away from from primarily talking about nonprofit, that term. I think it's a good term. And I think it's a very positive term, but I think what we've done a little bit is, and by we, I just mean our culture, the American culture or the international culture about nonprofits has relegated impact to just the nonprofit space. Like it's expected there, right? It's where it's supposed to happen. It's where it's legally supposed to happen by them having to have a mission that is oriented towards some cause of public concern. And so I think where the future goes is a little bit more of a purposeful overlap in the fact that as business, as government, as nonprofit, as a player in the local scene, wherever you are, that impact isn't exclusive to nonprofits. I talk to students all the time that if you think that the only place you're going to impact the world is in a nonprofit, you're going to be disappointed. I mean, if that's the only place you're looking for impact. And so I think where we're growing certainly is going to be in the nonprofit space, but I think that there's a lot of opportunities in courses at Mays Business School. And it's already being done. But I think in the future is certainly having some overlap there where courses and assignments and, companies that we're using as examples are looked at on a more full level for the impact that they have in a community, both positive and negative. I think we can learn a lot from decisions that are made in that space.
It seems that the way we're always taught to think about business is in terms of for-profit or, as we've been discussing primarily today, not for profit.
Yeah.
Then how are you talking about breaking that paradigm in some way, or are you talking about more of this happening in the for-profit space because for-profit businesses are increasingly concerned with social progress and, having a positive impact on the planet? Like, what is it? What does this look like?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the focus being less on the organizational structure that accomplishes the impact, but the impact itself, right? Okay. And so, there are, you look at any company that's out there. I mean, you can look at Starbucks, right? A traditional for-profit endeavor, right? That does really great work, keeps us all awake in the morning. I mean, they do a good job of that. But they've recognized in some of their ways in which that align with the goals and purpose of their own company that also overlap with issues of concern that can also benefit them as well. Like they, provide education to their employees, right? So they're helping fill a gap that they can help fill, but at the same time, it also benefits them, which isn't a bad thing. So I think that there's by not saying impact only happens in nonprofit space and saying it can happen elsewhere and it should happen elsewhere, I just think there's a level of responsibility in our decision making that can come out in the decisions we make, and it's more of a collective impact as opposed to just a sector-driven impact.
So let's talk about the hardest question that gets us to in the for-profit sector, in my mind, which is when the rubber meets the road and you have to make a decision between, does the marginal dollar go to something that can have a community impact, or does it go back into earnings per share and impacting the stock price? How do we even... Is there even a method for how we think about that? I mean, obviously it's different for each person, but how do you suggest that, since you're an expert in this area, how do you suggest people even start to think about those kinds of questions?
It's just like generosity, right? Or an ethical decision that you make. If the first time you're making that decision is at the moment when you have to make that decision, good luck, right? Like it might go well, it might not.
Right.
And so just like we talk about our students with ethics, to be mindful of the situations, put yourself in a situation ahead of time so that when that situation happens, you can respond in a way that you've thought through it a little bit already. And so I say the same thing with generosity. And so I think there's a lot of culture driven pieces, a lot of leadership driven pieces. There's an organization, our company called Bridgeway Capital. Bridgeway Capital gives away 50% of their profits every year to issues that they care about as a company. Yeah. But that didn't start randomly, right? It started from the beginning, from leadership, and it's been a purposeful, strategic decision. And so, to answer your question, there isn't a clear method on how to do that, truthfully. Okay. In the nonprofit space, we're trying to answer, how do you measure impact? And we've tried to use the term social return on investment, which is difficult to measure. Does the dollar that I give to the Boys and Girls Club, does that impact a child's life in a measurable way, right? And can we measure that? And so in the for-profit space, there is a recognition that you're engaging into some gray area a little bit. And so it is a lot of values-driven decisions at that point.
Sure. Many of our students complete internships. It's a requirement in many programs, including the certificate you run. This question is just for fun. Let's say you decided tomorrow that you wanted to go get an internship with a social purpose organization, nonprofit or for-profit. Sure. What organization would you want to intern for?
Yeah, that was a good one. I thought about this one. It was really hard to pick. I ended up landing on an organization called Charity Water.
Yeah.
Really because I'm just fascinated by their approach to raising money, to documenting their impact, because I think they recognize that it's hard, that people donors want to be drawn into the story, but not in a fake way, right? Not in a way that is marginalizing those that are marginalized already. There's some nonprofits that, with good intentions, will capitalize on suffering in a way that is exploitive, right? And we don't see that a lot. A lot of times it's international that happens, but Charity Water does an incredible job of dignifying the people that they serve. And so dignity is a piece of, if I have students from my classes listening at any point, I talk about dignity a lot. And so, because I think that that's a big piece of what we can bring, is giving people dignity. And so the work that they do, the way they take pictures, right? They are uplifting pictures. They're smiling. Now they're showing hard things, right? Kids don't have clean water. Right. Let's be real about the issue at hand, but they're able to bring people into the story a little bit. And then the founder, I love his story as well. Scott Harrison wrote a book called Thirst, and he went over his time as a nightclub promoter to realizing that wasn't as fulfilling as he expected, to going and serving overseas on a medical missions boat called Mercy Ship, where they do free medical care for the coast of Africa. And he saw that water was a really just a critical need that could be met, right? Sure. Or dirty water was a critical need that could be met by giving clean water. And the barriers to do that really weren't that much, as long as you could drill down into a source, right? So Charity Water itself, I think because they are always and have been at the forefront of innovating the nonprofit space and bringing a positive name to it, I think learning from them, they always feel like they're a few steps ahead of everybody else. And so I'd like to be a few steps ahead as well, if possible. Yeah. So, but they're a really, really great organization.
What is the most important thing you can do to give people dignity?
I mean, treat them like a person. Like it's not that the bar's not low, right? Treat them like a person. You know, you see somebody on the side of the street, like they're a human that has had a life and a story. And, you know, whether you engage with them or not, just even in your mind, you can give them dignity, right? By viewing them as a human. I think that it's really easy for us to distance ourselves from any number of hard issues. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, right?
No, not at all. But I'm wondering where the lack of giving people dignity tends to manifest. I mean, obviously, you know, often there tends to be a sense of distance between us and the person we're helping. Sure. But what I'm trying to piece together is how that distance ends up making us make the other person feel undignified. Where does this problem show up?
Sure. And again, it's usually not explicit, right? It's not like the person's like, I feel undignified, you know? Right. It's subtle. And so it's creeping. It's like, it's a bunch of small decisions along the way that all of a sudden you're like, okay, they haven't been empowered. And now, so it's a lot of empowerment, right?
Yes.
So giving people a voice. So, an example would be locally. I got to have a couple local nonprofit shout outs. Brazos Valley Food Bank.
Yes.
They have a program called Together We Grow.
Right.
Together We Grow helps educate those that are either homeless or struggling to make ends meet to they want to shorten the food line.
Right.
They don't want to give more people food.
Right.
They want less people to need food. Right. And so a lot of that's empowering them to make decisions about what does healthy eating look like? How do I manage my finances well to a place in which I'm not reliant on, the food bank in a meaningful way. So yeah, so empowerment, I guess, is probably the buzzword there that would fit there the most.
And it seems like what that so often comes back to is some kind of education.
Sure.
And do you find that there is a form of education that shows up consistently in the nonprofit space? Is it an understanding of geology, for example, like in terms of this is how we can help this community understand how to extract safe, like clean water for themselves? Is it an understanding of economics? Is it an understanding of the social? I don't know. Like what sort of education do you find keeps showing up the most often?
Yeah, I think that, we're getting into some really big challenges of the nonprofit space.
Right.
Is that each nonprofit might have their different view on what the root of the problem is. Right.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
You have 10 different organizations looking at poverty. One of them says, oh, that's family. The family structure needs to be strengthened, which I personally believe is probably a pretty good indicator of a lot of different things. The strength of a family. But then others may say, oh, no, it's not that. It's education. Like family's fine, but then education. But then someone would say, well, the family structure can lead to education. They're like, okay, well then it's systemic issues that have happened in the past that are now rearing their heads now. And so the interpretation of an issue is hard too, right? So it's a incredibly challenging issue. And so there's a recognition that, that's why I like organizations like United Way or foundations that are funding issue areas and almost, oh, by the way, working with nonprofits is that there's a collective nature that has to happen for us to look at a problem and see it and tackle it from a bunch of different areas. There's a coordination gap, I think, that happens because of good intentions across the nonprofit space.
Let's shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
And talk about sustainability.
Let's do it.
Why should students care about sustainability?
Well, if they ever were in Boy Scouts, leave the world, better than how you found it.
Right.
I think that we get caught up, I think, in the aspirational views of it, in terms of, We talk about people, planet, and profit, right? And the aspirations of what we want our world to look like are really big and hard to really feel like we could get there. And so I think bringing it back to a base level, I like talking about social sustainability. We often talk about with sustainability it being kind of going green, right? Which is good, all for it. I'm on the Aggie Green Fund here at A&M, which helps fund green projects across the campus, but the social sustainability, again, it goes back to the people that are being affected, that are making decisions. We're talking big issues like human rights and child trafficking and all these things that it's important for everybody, and everybody meaning businesses, nonprofits, and government, to, at the very minimum, understand what their impact is. Positive and negative, right? I'm not even saying that a business is required to engage in this. I don't know. They're not at this point. But looking at ways in which they at least can identify the areas in which the world looks different because of the work they do, positive and negative. And so sustainability, I think, is important, sure, but it has to be personal too. I mean, you have to know what you want from it, right? You have to know what you want the world to look like in the future to actually make decisions now. Otherwise, you're just kind of randomly doing things.
How do businesses know where to orient their decision-making in the sustainability realm?
Yeah. So there's a concept or a movement called the Sustainable Development Goals. So those have been made in partnership between the United Nations and KPMG. And a number of other companies, but they were the two main drivers. And these sustainable development goals get at some of the largest issues that are affecting our world, right? These are big, bold goals like, no extreme poverty, peace and justice, clean water for all, like big, huge things that we'd like to, I know you're like, oh, let's go. And then you're like, how do I do that? So there's a bunch of details and measures on how to get there. But we had an opportunity a couple of years ago to meet one of the primary drivers of that, Lord Michael Hastings, British royalty. So he came down and shared with us about the process of developing these goals and the meaning behind them and what it could look like for the private sector to engage them in ways that are powerful. And so he shared with us that, and the temptation is to say, yeah, those are huge, but I mean, where do we fit into that? And so they know that question is coming. And so on the website, if you look up sustainable development goals, you can see some really breakdown of how they're broken down. And even in our Maze strategic plan, we have a few that we've oriented some pieces towards, which I think is good. And so it's things like that, small movements like that. If everybody's doing their part, we'll move forward as opposed to backward, which is a goal.
Great. You also serve as a faculty advisor to 180 Degrees Consulting and Net Impact. Give us a minute on that.
And the Wells Project and Brotherhood of Christian Aggies.
Okay.
So there's
all
four. Right. Those two first ones are more Maze business specific. And again, in our theme of, student empowerment, right? It's student organizations are just a great way for students to be able to practice what they're learning right now, right? They can get internships, which is a good place to do that. They can get jobs, but then the ability to develop, their leadership skills and their decision-making and managing people and all that, while happening around a topic that they're also passionate about is something that I'm, very pro for. And so my role as a faculty advisor is really to make sure they don't burn the building down, right? They wind them up and let them go. Students are passionate, right? And for us to give them space to move and innovate and operate, I'm not going to get in the way of that. Even if I know they're going to make a bad decision or what I think is a bad decision, I'm like, no, I kind of have to think, is it going to ruin everything? Probably not. Are they going to learn and grow from it? And can I talk with them about it afterwards? Absolutely. So 180 DC Net Impact, they have very real impact on the nonprofit space. And so 180 DC in particular, they do pro bono work for nonprofit organizations, and they've even done some for-profit. So they help develop JCPenney's CSR plan. right? They've worked with AT&T as a student organization. And these are graduate level to freshman students doing this over a semester timeframe, but they've kind of found their niche of working with startup new nonprofits that are open and willing to learn and grow and welcome in some students that are educated on the topic and educated on that environment to be able to help them move forward. So again, just a really great opportunity to watch students do their thing and not get in the way.
And what is CSR for our listeners who might not know yet?
Corporate social responsibility.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You have a family, wife.
I do.
2 kids, as we talked about, and
one on the way.
One on the way. What surprised you about having a family?
Can I say responsibility again? No, I think that right. Clearly I'm surprised by responsibility.
Right.
No, look, here's the thing. My, being a dad and being a husband to me is the ultimate responsibility, right? I mean, if your family is taken care of and is moving forward, positively and growing. And, I mean, I can't, it's hard for me to think of anything else that's greater than that to me personally. And so, with that mindset, right, thinking about how do I, help my wife be the best person that she can be at the same time she's doing that for me and probably more so. Right. And then how do my kids, I have a 4 and a 2-year-old right now. How do you, give them the tools to be successful in their own way and not get in their way, as they're growing up. My oldest, Grant, he's 4, actually has quite a bit of physical special needs that has been just a game changer for our family. And this is probably the moment where I'll probably cry at some point, but the ability to now know what it's like to be on the receiving end of help is incalculable, right? So we've been on the receiving end of generosity when my whole life I've been on the giving end of generosity.
Sure.
And it's a hard place to be, but I was talking with my wife the other day, and the fact that we have people around us that are with us in the hard moments is really powerful. And so, as a family, it's staying close in hard times, right? We've gone through a lot of hard stuff, and like a lot of families have, like all families have. And, how do you, look at a 4-year-old that is going to have some challenges in life and be, positive about it. And somehow we have, right? I think it goes back to the faith piece. Yeah. I mean, that's a big piece of it, of how we've done that. But when you look at your 4-year-old, you look at your 2-year-old and they're happy with how life is and they're joyful and being fun and being kids, it's, you have to step back and let that, and enjoy those moments. And so, yeah, it's been a big responsibility. If I would have written it out about being a parent and a husband before, probably been pretty scary. Yeah. But yet you're prepared for it along the way. It doesn't happen overnight. So you grow into each moment, right? Someday we'll have teenagers. Someday we'll have older kids, and we'll be ready for those moments. Not ready right now, right? My 2-year-old daughter, I'm like, no, you can, yeah, you're good to where you're at. Right. I don't want you to be older yet. But someday it'll happen. And then that time we'll be ready for it. And yeah.
Is there anything you mentioned that you've received a lot?
Sure.
Is there anything in particular or a person in particular? Anything you would want to point to?
Sure. So we raised money for a service dog for our oldest, for Grant, to train a service dog. Now that's been a messy process, which we've been open about to everybody that's been there. It wasn't a seamless process, but we had a lot of people that chose to invest their resources, their money in our family to help train a dog that could be a support in some meaningful way to our son. Mm-hmm. And that's worked out in a lot of ways, and it's been challenging in others, right? It hasn't been perfect, but I'm very awkward when it comes to accepting help. So that was hard. It was very humbling for our family to just, when people said, no, we want to help. We're like, no, it's good. Like, no, really, we want to help. That whole thing, like, no, I'll take the check. No, you take the check. No, I'll take the check. Like, let's just split it. It's to accept help it's been a practice. I think we've gotten a little bit better at it, but you just have to be humble and know that people, just like my intentions to give to somebody are good, or trying to be good. Those that are, giving to us over time have been, we just have to trust that they're doing it because they love us and they care for us and want our well-being and really care for our son. And so that was a unique process. People gave us a lot of money and we were just blown away by the support. So yeah, it's really powerful.
So a moment ago, we brushed back against the dignity conversation again in a way, surprisingly, that doesn't seem like it has a whole lot to do with education, because you're as familiar with these structures as anyone is. So you said earlier that allowing the other person to be a person in those moments is particularly important. Was there anything about how people interacted with you that made you feel respected or like a person, or like they're not patting you on the head, but rather lifting you up and helping you and your family go forward and prosper? Is there anything that you would offer to someone who wants to help a friend of theirs or someone else that they're aware of who's in that kind of situation? How do you do that the best possible way? Yeah,
that's a really, really good question. So don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to admit that you don't have all the answers. Okay. Right? Sometimes sometimes someone coming to you and saying, "Hey, look, we don't know what you're going through. We've never experienced that. We don't know, but I see it." Right. And I don't even know what to do with that. To me, that's refreshing. I'm like, thank you. Like, I don't know either. Right. Like, don't put the responsibility on me to tell you what I need, because I'm already bad enough at that anyways. Right. So, So I think it's just a willingness to see them as people, and seeing us as a family that has our own challenges and struggles, and to not shy away from the hard parts. And so that's been the beauty of at least living here in this area. Our friends and family and people we've known haven't shied away. And our son makes it really easy because he's hilarious and will talk anybody's ear off. But people still call and check in on how things are going. And even when everything seems fine, and every day is not really hard, right? There are a lot of good days. But I think the recognition that it's okay for you to not have the answer for someone that's in your life that is going through something that you've never experienced. Right. But not saying something is probably the not a great option at that point. Right. So admitting, it seems like if we're trying to crystallize this as simply as possible, the admission that you don't know that person's life, but you see their struggle and you want to help in some way. Is that a that's a good start, right? It's not a bad start. It feels like a low bar. Yeah. Right. But it really isn't. And people will ask, right. And people will say things. You're like, I don't really know if you knew that you meant that the way you said it. So I'll kind of take that charitably. But yeah, so there's a lot of space. As we've engaged the special needs population, you just start realizing how the world is set up for everybody else. Right. And that's okay. So I had a group of students in my class last semester for my 1-hour seminar. They made a fictional nonprofit that worked towards giving adults with special needs jobs. I thought it was really cool. And they did a really great job in their presentation talking about adults with special needs as opposed to special needs adults. So that people first language. Mm-hmm. You would say a child with autism as opposed to an autistic child. Okay. Right. So small tweaks like that where people don't really notice it, but if someone were to say, yeah, your special needs son, I'm not offended by it, but it would help me think that you see him more as a person. If you say he's a child that almost like happens to have special needs, like he's a child first, right? He's Grant first. And so, So seeing students do that and then being able to tactfully and respectfully speak into other people's lives about how to interact in this space that's really awkward, and we admit it. It's awkward for us too. So yeah, not shying away is a big piece of it.
It seems like one of the inherent challenges of empathy then is being able to walk the line between I feel this thing in you. There is some pain that I sense is there, but I don't pretend to understand the exact nature of it. Because empathy, if I understand it correctly, is being able to identify with someone.
Sure.
But you have to be careful. There's sort of an unknowable element of it. You have to be careful how far you take it, because you can't say to a person, who just lost a child, for example, I know what you're going through. No, you don't.
Right.
But flowing out to them in their moment of pain is the way to do that is one of the trickiest things we have to do as adults.
I agree. I'll go with you with that statement right there. It's tricky. And again, but what's the alternative, right? The alternative is doing nothing.
Right.
Is that better than giving it a shot?
No.
I'm not saying you were saying that, but I think that that's a really, the empathy space is scary. Yeah. Right. It's really, really scary from the outside. Right. And then as soon as you go through the veil, you're like, oh, we're all people. This isn't so bad. I mean, it's bad. It's not great, the reason why we're doing this, but it's a little bit more freeing to operate in that space. I think the from a distance, you can make interpretations and assumptions that just, are easily dispelled taking one step forward.
Okay.
Yep.
We come back to gratitude a lot on this show. We believe that gratitude is one of the biggest contributors to happiness.
Sure.
What makes you grateful?
I'm a big family guy, as you can tell already. Right. So, I'm grateful that through challenging circumstances, we've been able to remain strong. But I think there's a number of families that go through challenging things and it tears families apart. Right. I'm grateful that hasn't happened. Currently we are in the moving process. We're moving in town, so don't have anybody worry. We're still here. We're building a house, that is going to be accessible for our son. So, grateful for the means to be able to do that.
Sure.
Right. The people that have allowed us to be able to do that. And I'm grateful that the house buying, house renting, house building process has been relatively smooth at this point. Yes. It's also terrifying, but grateful that we found such a great support system here that, this is home. And to be able to invest here and have people invest in us and give us the freedom to invest in them has been, I'm incredibly grateful for that. Yeah.
As a Gallup Strengths Finder strengths educator, what have you learned about your own personal strengths and how have you been able to intentionally grow in them?
So I love Strengths Finder. I think it's accessible and relatively simple for anybody to help identify areas in which they can talk about themselves. Sometimes it's hard to talk about ourselves in ways that make sense. And so I think the beauty of Strengths Finder and the 5 talent themes that you get, not strengths, the talent themes that say you are naturally predisposed to being good at X, the ability for us to then invest in those and give ourselves opportunity to grow towards a strength. I think StrengthsFinder does a great job. There's a bunch of other things out there that help as well. I'm not an expert on the Enneagram, so don't ask me any Enneagram questions. I need to. That's like a goal for this summer because my students all talk about it. But StrengthsFinder, I think that I have found the most value in understanding what that talent theme is saying about who I am or how I operate. But also looking at it's called the shadow side or the barrier label. Right. So what does it look like when a talent theme or a strength is used unproductively? And that's been most telling. It's easy to have a positive view of myself, right? But it's a lot more. I'm a more nuanced person when I can understand the flip side to that. So, for example, would be my number one strength or talent theme is belief, and which is not all that surprising given the work that I do. I have to be at my best. I'm bought into a mission. I'm going full force towards a particular purpose or a goal. I'm deeply, bought into it. The barrier label or the shadow side, when used unproductively, it would say I would have blinders on, right? Like I'm only focused on that mission, that any externality or something that comes across, I'm less able to navigate that, which I've seen that happen at times. So I just have to be conscious of that to be bought in doesn't mean to be blinded by like your one goal, like your singular goal. So talking with students about those, I did a Gallup Strengths Finder certification course, and it was just, gave some good tools to help students unpack that. All of our freshmen take it. So every student at Mays, every undergrad, and probably every graduate student, honestly, has done it at some point, but all of our freshmen have done that. And so it gives a common language too, for us to speak to our students as well.
What strengths of your wife and kids do you appreciate most?
So my 4-year-old hasn't taken the StrengthsFinder test. I'm waiting for him to be of age to do that. But so my wife, we were talking this weekend. I said, remind me of the 5 that you have, and one that has always stuck out is empathy. Right. Shocker. Yep. And so just talking about what I've learned. So yeah, she's able to step in the shoes of other people somehow, some way, all the time, every day. It just happens. Yep. And she feels it like to her core. And that's challenging to do that. It's hard. It's scary for me to feel that all the time. I'm like, I'll put some distance there, but she's really good at kind of seeing a need, stepping into it, and somehow feeling it to where she kind of has a better way to operate in that. So, I think that has always stood out from day one, has been something that I've seen. And my kids, they're just really joyful right now. That's not a talent thing, but joy, I think, is good. They have such a charitable interpretation of the world around them. Like my son will walk out on a rainy day and say, "It is a beautiful day outside." Like it's not, but you know what, buddy? It is. Like, that's fine. So I'll go with that.
Right. Rapid fire.
Yeah.
What do you consider your most valuable failure?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I'm actually more concerned with the small failures that build up before you realize you've actually failed.
Oh.
So, I think big failures are good, and certainly, there are those, but when I think about failing, I think about the times in which I have spoken before I listened. Right. Like I heard some of this comes from advising. This comes from parenting. This comes from being a husband, like an employee. It's just being a fundraiser, talking with people in need. Because what happens is I am assuming what they're about to say. Right. Or I am thinking about what I'm going to say before they say it. It happens all the time. We do that. And so the failure moments are the times in which I've done that and I've misinterpreted it and offered advice or feedback that just wasn't relevant or meaningful or helpful at all. And so the successful piece of that is recognizing those moments so that it doesn't snowball into a habit that I have of doing that, right? I'm trying to be very conscious when I'm talking with people to actually be dialed in, right, to that moment and meet that person or student where they are right then. So the failures have just been the times where it didn't move the needle at all. And it was probably because I just didn't listen, which is really simple.
Okay. What do you think is people's biggest misconception of you?
I think that that everything is put together, right? It's very easy to put to make sure that things are put together, right? Mm-hmm. And not that I'm, I'm unraveled at home, right? But it's that, that there are challenging things, and the profession I have chosen is to always be thinking about poverty and homelessness and hunger and all these things, to where, there are moments where it's tough and it's hard, and I'm pretty good at kind of making sure it looks good. But it's not as easy as it may seem sometimes to balance all that behind the scenes. And had a lot of practice, but I think the misconception is that that everything is all put together all the time. It's not. And I'm okay with that. So, but those that know me, the best thing about that question is that the ones that know me best should know that already.
Right.
Right.
There are a lot of good things about that question. If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, who would it be?
Well, I think it would be fascinating right now. This is so cliche of the work I have to learn from Bill and Melinda Gates right now.
Okay.
So, and here's why. Not because I want their money. That's not why. Because they have chosen to engage some of the hardest issues on a massive scale with significant amount of chances that they fail.
Right.
Like just incredible amount of failure can happen and has happened. And they've admitted that.
Right.
Right. So they primarily operate internationally because their impact can be greater. Money goes a lot further overseas. They got some pushback, so they invested heavily domestically in education. After about a year, they were like, yeah, we didn't do such a great job. Education's really hard.
Yeah.
And we need to put a lot more money into it and do it a way different way. And so being around people and a couple that are able to, that have made it their life's mission to invest in others. And because I don't see it as an obligation for them to do what they do. Right. Others may see that they have so much, therefore they must give a lot of it away. I actually think that they have a responsibility to think about that decision. And I'm glad they've come on the other side of saying, we're going to do this. And so being in their minds and being around them, seeing their decision making and knowing that they think differently than I do on a lot of things would be a really sweet opportunity to grow.
What is your fondest memory of TAMU?
Yeah, it's cool. Living, working here, going to school here there's a lot. I mean, I met my wife here. So again, when I proposed to her, we had, we kind of went around to different places across campus and we still live here. So those places are still here. Right. And so, the friendships and the growth that has happened. And I mean, I started at A&M in 2007 as a kid. Right. And now with kids and, a real job, so to speak, it's to see the growth that's happened here and to be able to, think about how much has happened over the years is just it's really sweet moments. And so, yeah, I met my wife here, so it can't get much better than that. Right.
True. Do you have anyone you would like to send some good bull, recognizing someone else for something good or great they've done?
So, I mean, I've talked about my family a lot, so there's always some good bull there. But I think this is it's broad, but the nonprofit organizations that wake up every day and step into the front lines to actually do the work that we're talking about, right?
Sure.
So we have the benefit of talking about these hard issues.
Right.
Which is good.
We're sitting in the ivory tower.
We're sitting in the ivory tower.
To a degree at the moment.
Which is fine. And we accept that, and that's okay. And so, but, when I talk with nonprofits, I think that, it's always a reminder to them that, you are going out and doing the work. Yeah. And tomorrow it's going to wake up and you're going to wake up, it's going to be hard, right? And it's going to be hard the next day, and poverty is not going to be solved tomorrow. We know that. It just won't be. But so, yeah, I think the good bull is to those that have made it their life's work to engage some of the hardest issues, but doing it with grace and tact and with a certain level of responsibility and ownership is really powerful.
Yeah, I would like to send some good bull to my in-laws, David and Cheryl Rydeen. David works for Raising Cane's, and they have they take their CSR pretty seriously as well.
Absolutely.
So, Kyle Gammenthaler, thanks for sharing your time with us.
Of course, this is great.
Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to stay up to date on our latest videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to receive notifications. If you're in a rush or on the road, you can still join us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. If you want to learn more about us or our guests, please visit our website at mays.tamu.edu/podcasts. Also, please check out Mays Business School's academic programs. They're the sponsors of our show, and you can find them in the description. Thanks, and gig 'em.